"You're worthless." Those words hit harder than any physical blow as I stood frozen at the whiteboard, marker trembling in my hand. "Look at him. He can't even write his own name properly," Dr. Morrison sneered, her voice cutting through the dead silence of the physics classroom. For 3 years, she'd made it her mission to break me. The boy who never spoke, the kid with the mental problems, the waste of a seat in her advanced class. The laughter started small, a few snickers from the back, then spreading like wildfire. My classmates had seen this routine before. Dr. Morrison would pick her target, tear them apart piece by piece, then stand back to admire her handiwork as another student's spirit crumbled. But today was different. Today, she'd made a fatal mistake. "Since you clearly don't belong in my class," she said, grabbing the marker from my hand, "let's make a deal." She turned to the board and began writing. The equation sprawled across the white surface, growing more complex with each stroke. College-level quantum mechanics merged with advanced calculus in a maze of symbols that made several students gasp. "Solve this right now, and I'll never question your presence in my class again." Her smile was pure poison. "Fail, and you'll transfer to remedial physics where you belong. In fact, I'll personally make sure of it." The class held its breath. They expected to see me break down, maybe cry like others had before. That's what she wanted. Another trophy for her wall of broken spirits. What she didn't know was that every night while my father drank himself into oblivion and my mother worked double shifts to keep our lights on, I'd been teaching myself. Physics wasn't just my escape, it was my revenge. Every insult, every humiliation had fueled thousands of hours of secret study. Not just high school physics, not even college level. I'd gone far beyond that. I looked at her equation. It was meant to be impossible, something to justify crushing another student's dreams. But to me, it was child's play. Behind my silence, behind my carefully constructed mask of mediocrity, lay something that would shatter her entire world. "Well?" Dr. Morrison crossed her arms, that familiar smirk playing on her lips. "Should I start the transfer paperwork now, or do you want to embarrass yourself first?" I picked up the marker. My hand wasn't shaking anymore. For the first time in 3 years, I let my mask slip, just a little. Just enough for her to see something in my eyes that made her smirk falter. Today, the silent boy would speak. Not with words, with numbers. And what I was about to write on that board would do more than just solve an equation. It would destroy her. The marker felt light in my hand. Dr. Morrison wanted a show. I'd give her one she'd never forget. I started writing. Fast, clean, perfect. The class watched in shock as numbers and symbols flowed across the board. No hesitation, no mistakes, just pure raw knowledge pouring out of me. "What do you think you're doing?" Dr. Morrison's voice shook slightly. She stepped closer, her heels clicking against the floor. "That's not how you—" I kept writing. Second board, third board. The solution was complex, but I'd solved harder problems in my sleep. Each stroke of the marker was another nail in her coffin. Someone in the back whispered, "Holy shit." Others pulled out their phones, recording. They knew they were watching something big. Dr. Morrison's face changed. The smirk died. Her eyes darted between me and the boards. I could see her running the calculations in her head, checking for mistakes, looking for any excuse to tear me down. She wouldn't find one. I stepped back from the final board. The room was dead silent. 5 boards of pure mathematics. Not just her problem solved. I'd gone further. I'd found 3 different solutions, each more elegant than the last. Then I'd extended her equation, pushing it into areas of quantum physics she probably didn't even understand. This is impossible," she stammered. "You must have cheated. There's no way." I turned to face her. 3 years of silence broke. "The Heisenberg uncertainty principle," I said, my voice clear and strong. "You wrote an equation about particle behavior, but you made mistakes. Basic ones." The class gasped. No one had ever spoken to Dr. Morrison like this. "Your second derivative was wrong," I continued, "and your quantum field assumptions ignored basic string theory. Should I explain why?" Her face went white. "You can't? Or should we talk about your published paper from 2019? The one with the calculation error in the third proof? The error that invalidates your entire conclusion?" That hit home. Her published work, her pride and joy, the paper that got her this job. I'd found the flaw months ago, buried deep in the math. She didn't know I'd read every paper she'd ever published, didn't know I'd checked every equation. "How dare you?" she sputtered. "You have no right to." "I have every right. My voice was ice cold. You want to talk about who belongs in this class? Let's talk about your credentials. Let's talk about how many of your theories fall apart under real scrutiny. The class was recording everything now. Phones everywhere. The quiet kid was taking down the mighty Dr. Morrison, and no one wanted to miss it. I've spent 3 years watching you break people, I said. 3 years watching you crush dreams because it made you feel powerful. Want to know what I was doing all that time? I pulled out my notebook, threw it on her desk. Open it. Her hands shook as she flipped through the pages. Original research, new theories, solutions to problems that had stumped physicists for decades, all in the margins of my class notes, hidden in plain sight. That's not... You couldn't. She looked up at me, really seeing me for the first time. Fear crept into her eyes. Not just fear of being wrong, fear of what I represented. Every student she'd ever bullied, every kid she'd labeled stupid, every dream she'd tried to crush. The university board meets next week, I said quietly. They love getting emails about groundbreaking student research. They also love hearing about teaching methods. I've got 3 years of recordings, 3 years of documented abuse, 3 years of you breaking students. The blood drained from her face. You wouldn't. Try me. The bell rang, making everyone jump. No one moved. Class dismissed, I said, not taking my eyes off her. But don't worry, tomorrow's lesson will be even more interesting. Students filed out, whispering, shooting videos, texting furiously. The story was already spreading. By tomorrow, everyone would know. Dr. Morrison stood frozen, staring at my notebook like it was a bomb about to explode. In a way, it was. Why? She whispered. Why wait 3 years? I picked up my notebook, looked her dead in the eye, because that's how long it took to gather enough evidence to make sure when I took you down, you'd never teach again. I walked out, leaving her with the ruins of her career spread across 5 whiteboards and a notebook full of genius. But this wasn't the end. This was just the beginning. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new challenges, because I wasn't just fighting for myself anymore. I was fighting for every student she'd ever hurt, every dream she'd tried to kill. And I wasn't done yet. Not even close. By morning, the videos had gone viral. Students I'd never met stopped me in the halls. Their eyes held something new, respect, awe, and a hunger for justice. But it wasn't just about me anymore. She made my sister quit school last year, a freshman told me, voice shaking. Said she was too dumb for science. Now my sister works at a gas station, too scared to try college. More stories poured in. Hundreds of them. Students from years past reaching out on social media. Each one carried the same pain, the same crushed dreams. Dr. Morrison told me girls can't do physics. She said I should stick to flipping burgers. My brother almost. The girl couldn't finish. Didn't have to. I saw the pain in her eyes. The principal called me to his office. Dr. Morrison sat there, eyes red, hands clutching a stack of papers. This is ridiculous, she snapped. He's trying to ruin my life over a few tough lessons. I pulled out my phone, hit play. Her voice filled the room. You're worthless, stupid, a waste of space. Different days, different students, same cruelty. The principal's face hardened. Dr. Morrison, I was pushing them to excel, she shouted, making them tougher. No, my voice cut through her excuses. You were breaking them because broken students made you feel powerful. I placed a thick folder on his desk. Every paper she's published in the last 5 years, every equation, every proof. I've marked the errors, the plagiarism, the faked data. Her face went gray. You can't prove. Page 47. I opened the folder. You copied data from Dr. Chen's 2018 paper, changed a few numbers, hoped no one would notice. The principal looked sick. Is this true? She tried to speak. Nothing came out. But here's the real problem, I continued. It's not just about bad science. It's about the lives you destroyed. I opened my laptop. Emails filled the screen. Hundreds of them. Former students, parents, even other teachers. Kevin Mars, 2019. Quit physics after you humiliated him. He could have cured cancer. Maria Suarez, 2020. Wanted to be an engineer. Now she's afraid to take math classes. Each name hit like a hammer. Each lost dream echoed in the silence. And then there's Peter Chen. Dr. Morrison flinched. Brilliant kid, full scholarship to MIT. Until you convinced him he was stupid. He killed himself last year. Left a note mentioning you by name. The principal stood up. "That's enough. Dr. Morrison, you're suspended pending a full investigation." "You can't," she started. "Actually," a new voice said, "we can." A man in a suit stood in the doorway. Next to him, a police detective. "I'm from the State Board of Education," the man said. "We've been watching the videos, reading the testimonies, and now, with evidence of academic fraud." The detective stepped forward. "Dr. Morrison, we need to discuss the grant money you received based on those fraudulent papers." She broke, right there. Years of arrogance crumbled into tears and pleas. But I wasn't done. "You know what the worst part is?" I said quietly. "You could have been great, could have inspired students, built them up. Instead, you chose to destroy them." I turned to leave, then stopped. "Oh, and that quantum equation you wrote on the board, the one you thought was impossible?" She looked up, mascara streaking her face. "A 16-year-old girl in your 4th period solved it, yesterday. After seeing my solution, she found an even better one. Turns out she's been hiding too, scared of you, just like I was." The girl had slipped me her solution between classes. Beautiful work, pure genius. "That's your legacy, Dr. Morrison. Not just the students you broke, but the brilliance you buried, the discoveries that never happened, the dreams that died in your classroom." I walked out. Behind me, I heard the detective reading Miranda rights, heard Dr. Morrison crying. But all I could think about were the emails still pouring in, the stories, the pain. And I knew this wasn't over, because somewhere out there, other teachers like her were destroying other students' dreams. Other bullies were crushing spirits, killing potential. Someone had to stop them. Someone had to make it right. I pulled out my phone. The email from MIT was still open. They wanted me to give a talk, share my story, start a movement, win the brilliant fight back. That's what they wanted to call it. I smiled, typed my response, because sometimes the quietest people have the loudest impact, and I was just getting started. 1 year later, I stood on a stage at MIT. 3,000 people sat in front of me. Millions more watched online. "We call them the hidden geniuses," I said into the microphone. "Kids who could change the world if only someone would listen." The screen behind me showed faces. Peter Chen, who never got to share his brilliance with the world. Maria Suarez, now crushing it at Stanford's engineering program. Kevin Mars, whose cancer research was making waves. They all came forward after my story broke. All found their voice. "Dr. Morrison isn't in teaching anymore," I continued. "She's facing charges for fraud, but she's not the point of this story." I clicked to the next slide. A quiet girl in the back row of a classroom. Head down, hidden. "This is Sarah. Last year, she was too scared to speak in class. Today, she's developing an AI that could revolutionize climate change research." Another click. A boy with shabby clothes and tired eyes. "Mike lives in his car. Self-taught programmer. Just got hired by Google at 16. The audience was dead silent. You see, bullies like Dr. Morrison exist everywhere. Teachers, bosses, parents who crush dreams because they're scared of what we might become. I pulled out my old notebook, the one that started it all. But here's what they don't understand. Silence isn't weakness. Sometimes it's where the greatest power grows. The screen filled with headlines. Hidden Genius Program launches nationwide. Quiet revolution in education. Student-led movement changes how we teach. Since that day in physics class, 10,000 students have come forward, found their voice, started changing the world. I opened my notebook. Remember that quantum equation? The impossible one? It helped unlock a new field of physics, but not because of me. I pointed to the audience. A girl stood up, Maria Suarez. Maria solved it, really solved it, found applications no one had seen before. And she did it while working at a coffee shop, too afraid to apply to college because a teacher once told her she was stupid. Maria smiled, tears in her eyes. But that's not why we're here today. The screen changed. A website appeared. This is Silent No More, a platform where students can safely report academic abuse, where hidden geniuses can find mentors, where brilliance doesn't have to hide anymore. The numbers rolled across the screen. 20,000 cases reported, 500 teachers removed from classrooms, 1 million students finding their voice. But most importantly, I clicked one last time. A simple message appeared. You're not alone. The audience stood. Thousands of phones lit up the auditorium like stars. Today, we're launching in 50 countries, every school, every classroom, because no dream deserves to die in silence. I closed my notebook for the last time. Dr. Morrison thought she was teaching us physics. Instead, she taught us something far more important. The room held its breath. She taught us that the quietest voice in the room might be the one that changes the world. I stepped back from the podium. The roar of the crowd was deafening, but I wasn't listening to them. I was listening to the messages pouring in from around the world, kids finding their voice, dreams awakening from long silences. Because that's the thing about silence. It only takes one person to break it, one voice to start an avalanche, one moment to change everything. And somewhere out there, right now, another quiet student is gathering their courage. Another hidden genius is about to rise. Another voice is about to break free. Will it be yours? Hit subscribe if this story moved you. Leave a comment telling us about your moment of standing up to a bully. And remember, sometimes the quietest person in the room is the one with the most to say. Because silence isn't weakness. It's just the sound of strength gathering itself. And your voice? It might be exactly what the world needs to hear next.